Welcome back to Inside City Hall. As we told you before the break, New York Democrats are increasingly optimistic that when all absentee ballots are counted, they will not have lost any ground in their majority control of the state Senate, and may even be able to pull off a supermajority, which would give them power to overrule Governor Cuomo on certain issues and could lead to movement on policy issues that are important to progressives. But the ballots are still being counted, with about half a dozen races yet to be called. So where does the balance of power stand in the state Senate right now? Joining me to go over the political math and also weigh in on a controversy that erupted on social media earlier today, I've got State Senate Deputy Majority Leader Mike Gianaris. He represents parts of Western Queens, including Astoria. Welcome. Good to see you, Senator.
Thanks for having me on, Errol.
So let's start with the overview. Democrats went into the elections holding 40 seats. Where do things stand now? What do you have for sure, and what is left to be called?
Well, on election night, there were already 36 seats secured, and there were 8 that were in the undecided column that needed to go to the absentee ballots. As of today, we've officially declared in 2 of them, which gets us to 38. I expect that by tomorrow morning, there will be 2 more that will come our way that will get us back to the number 40 we have now. That would then leave 4 additional races that need to be decided, and we are very optimistic in most of them. So we think there's a really good shot that we can still get to that supermajority. We're confident under any circumstances that we will be increasing our numbers from the 40 we had in this past session.
Okay, now I want to touch on some of them. Let's go all the way upstate to the 60th district up in Buffalo. Sean Ryan, who's now in the Assembly, is on January 1st going to become a state senator. He won an open seat that had been held by a Republican for a long time. And you've got 2 seats in Rochester where Democrats did more or less the same thing. Were those races that you had to put a lot of time and money into, or was this Democrats just kind of coming out in big numbers up there?
Well, those were really recruiting successes more than anything. Those were seats that had popular Republicans sitting in them, some of them who were former Democrats, and they were getting Democratic votes, who, because they were no longer in the majority, chose to leave the Senate. And so they were now open seats, Democratic districts. We got Assemblyman Sean Ryan in Buffalo. We've got Jeremy Cooney in Rochester, who almost won that election against the incumbent in the 2018 cycle. Summer Brook is a very dynamic candidate in the neighboring district in Rochester. And so we started out engaging, thinking they would be the most competitive races in the state. They were doing so well at some point that they required less support than we might otherwise have given, which freed us up to go win additional seats elsewhere.
Got it. Okay, so now let's come downstate. You got into this Twitter fight between you and the PBA. You started out kind of razzing the group for supporting candidates that apparently got beat in Nassau County, which used to be a Republican stronghold. But then they responded with this tweet saying, there it is, keep looking over your shoulder, Mike. You had to bring in your billionaire buddies and your president, vice presidential candidates to barely squeak by. How much did you spend per vote, and how much will you have to spend after voters suffer through 2 more years in no-bail New York? First of all, did you take that as a threat, that keep looking over your shoulder?
Well, it's certainly a threat. The question is, what kind of threat is it? When someone tells you to look over your shoulder, that means something's coming at you from behind. So no matter how it was meant, they might say it was meant as a political threat versus an actual physical threat. But it's menacing, because when someone says that, they know what the implication is. They know what the innuendo is. And it's certainly not something that a group that represents over 30,000 people who are armed and have license to shoot their firearms throughout the city should be making. I think the union has really lost its bearings. It's gone off the rails, and it's become more of an armed political organization. They're out there endorsing Donald Trump, investing their members' money in state senate races in areas of the state they don't even represent. And my point was simply to start this whole thing. They wanted to make a point. They said, we're going to go take out Kevin Thomas. I think it was Zach Fink that originally reported that. They wanted to drop $1 million to defeat Kevin Thomas. And they made all sorts of hoopla about they wanted to send a message to the state senate by going after Kevin Thomas. Well, Kevin Thomas has won. And so if they wanted to send a message was sent. It was just the opposite one that they thought they were sending. And in the meantime, they wasted $1 million of union dues that I'm sure their members would like to have back. They should really focus.
Well, that's the real point. Why is the New York City PBA making endorsements in Nassau County? You said it was purely symbolic, because it's not like they were going to flip control of the Senate. They would have needed to win 8 or 10 seats, and you don't do that by taking out a freshman, named Kevin Thomas out in Nassau County.
Yeah, I'm only going based on what Zach himself reported. They seemed to want to make a point. They thought they found someone they thought was a weak link and they could beat and hang a scalp on their walls, but unfortunately for them, Kevin Thomas won. Not only did he win, he won by bigger numbers than he won in 2018. So if this election was intended to send a message, it sent a message that validated what Kevin Thomas did. It validated what this Senate majority did. And in the meantime, the union wasted $1 million to send the exact opposite statement that they wanted to send. And so I was making that point. They responded by getting incredibly aggressive and inappropriate. Hopefully it's not anything more than words in a tweet, but it's certainly disquieting.
An armed political organization, that's a memorable phrase. Let me move on. Now that you have a solid majority, what is on the agenda? Are you planning to take back some of the budget powers that the legislature granted to Cuomo at the height of the pandemic?
Well, the results of these elections will have a lot to say about what kind of negotiating position we have going into next year. Supermajority helps a great deal. I do think the legislature understood that this year, in the spring especially, we were in a unique, incredible crisis, that we needed swift government, versatile government, and the best way to do that was to allow the executive to move nimbly, more nimbly than requiring legislative action on every action would take. Going into next year, I think things are very different now. We are still in an emergency as it relates to the pandemic, but we do have a little bit more of a sense of how to handle it, and I would expect that the legislature intends to reassert itself, working in tandem with the governor. I mean, he's done many things right, and I think we'd be happy to partner with him to continue on those things. And in the areas where we disagree, we'll certainly assert ourselves, as is our right to do.
The politics of managing a supermajority, or a Big Ten, if you want to call it that, by definition, you're going to bring in enough people that you'll in some ways have to moderate the demands to make sure you can protect those newest and maybe most vulnerable members of that supermajority, right? When there's talk about introducing a wealth tax, doesn't that sort of put some of those newer seats at risk?
Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of taxing the wealthy to help us get through the incredible budget crisis we have. It is incredibly popular. It is popular in New York City. It is popular upstate. It is popular in the suburbs. It is popular with Democrats, independents, and Republicans. So I'm not of the opinion that when we're talking about tax policy and taxing the wealthy, that is at all a political detriment. And I think it's something that's going to be necessary as we get through the next several months. But to your larger question about protecting our diverse and large conference, we already have experience with that. The 40-member majority we have today is the largest Democratic majority in over a century in this state, and we have a number of different regions represented and different ideologies, and we've managed it especially well. Particularly, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who is, I believe, the best Senate leader in the history of the state, has been very adept at making sure everyone has their needs met, all the voices are heard, and we act as one body in the Senate, and we intend to stay in that unified fashion.
Okay, and last, somewhat technical question. Is the group that sits in January going to be the group that does the reapportionment, or will it be the next cycle that determines who will draw all of the political lines in the state?
It's a complicated question. There is a commission that is supposed to recommend lines initially. That process doesn't really get moving until late into 2021, and then the legislature in 2022 will vote on a line. So it will be the group that gets seated this January that will still be in office in 2022 when that vote happens. So the short answer to your question is yes, but I wanted to give some explanation.
Okay. Best of luck with the remaining count, and we'll see you when the session gets underway in January. Thanks a whole lot for joining us.
Thanks so much, Errol.
All right.